Welcome to another episode of Women in Focus. Be kind, be calm, and be safe. This was a phrase coined by the person that we're going to be interviewing today. She is the Public Health Officer of Province of British Columbia. We are really delighted to have Dr. Bonnie Henry as our Woman in Focus today. Dr. Henry, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
It's been a dream of mine to interview you ever since we heard that very calming voice a year ago when we got into the pandemic. Let me take you back to that time. When I saw Wuhan preparing a 1,000-bed hospital, I didn't think it was going to come out from China over to the world. At that point, when you must have heard that news and must have seen it, what were you feeling?
Oh, goodness, thinking back to the past year, at that time, I had these underlying concerns that we were going to see. But I don't know that I really believed that we would have as much impact as it has had, at least at first. Having been through the SARS outbreak in Toronto in 2003, I was pretty certain we were going to have some cases come to BC. With our travel patterns, lots of people who go back and forth between that area of the world here. But I think there was still the possibility that we could control it, that we could keep it and push it back into nature like we had done in 2003. But really, by the time we got into April, May last year, it became very clear that we were going to have a big impact, not just here in Canada, but around the world.
When you were working with the SARS team in Toronto, you had information on this kind of a virus. Did you know how dangerous this particular virus was?
Oh, well, in Toronto at first, it was the first coronavirus that caused a global outbreak like that. And right. It was not as infectious as this virus, so it didn't spread as easily, but it was much more severe illness. So people, almost all, a very high percentage of people ended up in hospital, and the death rate was much higher. But this virus, so this was the second time we've had a coronavirus that has caused this type of an outbreak. And the tricky thing with the one that we have now, which is called SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus 2, is that it spreads much more easily. It can spread from people before they have symptoms themselves. And most people don't get really, really sick. But then some people do, and a higher proportion of people do than we see with other viruses like influenza, for example. And we found out as we were watching this that it's particularly hard on older people. As we get older, we're much more likely to have more severe illness from the SARS virus that causes COVID.
When you, I'm just taking you back and just bringing you up to point where we are now, when you were looking at all that, and we heard on television reporters or politicians saying this is going to be the new norm. Did you realize at that point that it's going to take over a year for this to be okay? Because people were saying that a vaccine takes more than 18 months to 5 years to make, yet we've gotten a vaccine within a year.
You know what? I have been so relieved that we have not only one, but we now have the 4 vaccines approved in Canada that are all safe and work really, really well. I was afraid that we would be in this much, much longer, actually. From the beginning, once we realized that it was not something we were going to be able to really stop right away, last March, April, May, by the time we got into the summer, and in BC in particular, our rates went down quite a bit in the summer, and we were able to do lots of things. So, but it wasn't going away. And every time we let our guard down, we'd have a flare up, we'd have an outbreak. If there was, people going on holiday in the interior, and we had lots of people get sick. When we had large weddings, when we had groups of people getting together, it would spread very, very quickly, even in the summer. So that worried me a lot. It made me think that we were going to have to deal with this virus for quite a long time.
Right.
So the fact that we got vaccines and they came earlier than we expected, that has just been such a huge, tremendous relief. But we're in a really challenging time now because we have more and more vaccine coming, which means we can protect people. And we're learning that they work really well. Especially we look at our long-term care homes and how effective vaccines have been at stopping this virus that was killing people in long-term care. And we are going to see that in our communities too, but we're not there yet. And I think people right now want to start doing things again. We want to go out and start having those celebrations and getting together with our family. And it's still too soon to do that. So we need to hold back still for another few weeks. If we can get to the end of April and our immunization program being what it is, we're going to be able to get back to doing those things safely. But we've seen that in BC in this last few weeks. We're starting to see more and more transmission because we're letting our guard down a little bit right now.
So do you think it's the variant that is overpowering, or is it all of us not taking it seriously? Because there was a time, as you mentioned, and I used to write every day how many cases there were, and way back in May, June, we only would have 30 or 90, maximum 100 cases went up to, I think, after August. So is it us letting our guard down that it's spreading and taking time?
It's now fairly widespread in the community, which means that especially in the Lower Mainland, that's where most of the population is. So it's even small groups of getting together or in workplaces where it can spread very quickly if we're not keeping our guard down. And of course, we know in some workplaces it's very hard to wear masks all the time, and that we have to be in close proximity. Some of our food processing plants, even in the agricultural, where people are living together in crowded conditions. And if we're living together in a multi-generational household, which many families do, and one person has it, see, this is where the variant comes in. The variant that we're seeing more commonly now makes it easier to transmit. So with the older viruses we were seeing, if you were in a household with 15 people, you'd maybe pass it to 3 or 4. Now we're seeing almost everybody in the households getting sick, and then they're passing it on. So right now, we're in that little bit of a race where we need to try and keep the transmission down as much as possible so we can protect more and more people with vaccine. So even when we had a little bit of leeway, a few months ago, we don't have that now because the new virus that we're seeing transmits that much more easily. So we just need to hold on a little bit longer. We do have a lot of light at the end of our tunnel, but that tunnel's not quite over yet.
We're talking to Dr. Bonnie Henry. Let's take a short break and I'll come back because I want to take you to your childhood. Because why did you want to become a doctor? I want to know that. I always wanted to be a broadcaster, so I became a broadcaster. But I want to hear why you wanted to be a doctor. So we'll be right back after this short break. Dr. Bonnie Henry is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Dr. Bonnie Henry, our Provincial Health Officer. Dr. Henry, why did you become a doctor? Were you a little girl when you wanted to be a doctor?
I was fairly young, I have to say. I have a sister who's 1 year older than me. And when we were, I guess we were probably 7 or 8, and she had to go into the hospital. She had to get her appendix out. And I remember going to visit her and just being fascinated by it. So she says that's when you decided you were going to be a doctor. And she's probably right. I was always fascinated with science and, doing little experiments. And I remember in high school talking with a family friend, and they were saying, well, what are you going to do? And just it really coming to me that, yeah, I want to be a doctor, which was kind of surprising. And nobody in my family was in medicine at all, but my parents were always very supportive, so that was nice.
Let's talk a little bit about that. How long did you live there?
So my father was in the military, so he was posted to Camp Gagetown at the time, and so I was born in the hospital in Fredericton. So we didn't live there very long. We moved around a lot when I was younger. So home really is where my father's family is from Prince Edward Island for many generations, and we spent all of our summers there with my grandparents. And my mom's family is from Halifax. So that part of the world is really where my roots are.
So how many in the family then? How many siblings?
Well, I'm very lucky. I come from a family of 4 girls, so
wow.
I'm number 2. I have an older sister, and we have 2 younger sisters.
And where are they all?
Well, most of them are still in Prince Edward Island. When my father retired, they went back to PEI. So I have a younger sister, and my niece and nephew are in PEI. My other youngest sister is and my nephew and her husband are in Halifax, and then my older sister's in Toronto right now. So we're a little bit spread out, but mostly back in PEI.
So at COVID time, it has been difficult to meet family?
It's hard. I know how hard it is. And, I try and connect with my family. They're all a long ways away. And normally I would go home to visit them at Christmas time or in the summer. And PEI is such a wonderful place to go in the summer. But we haven't been able to do that this year. I was very lucky. And just before we sort of shut everything down, my older sister, Lynn, and my younger sister and niece and nephew they had planned to come visit me here in BC last March for March break for my niece and nephew are teenagers, and they arrived out here just as we were putting in all of the restrictions, and my younger sister and the kids went home to PEI, but my older sister ended up staying with me for a month, which was really helpful to have somebody during that really stressful time.
Right. During your work as a doctor, when you became, you joined the Navy as well, and I understand you worked for 10 years in the Navy. How was that?
It was also a different time. I was, for the first number of years, I was the only woman on board the ship that I was in. But, I learned a lot. You learn a lot about how to be, about human nature, about how people deal with things. I learned a lot about the military, got to travel a lot. We went all kinds of interesting places. But it was a challenging time to be sort of at the forefront of, at that time, even in my medical school class, it was at the time we were just starting to get more women in medicine. There was still a sense that things were very much male-dominated. It was a male-dominated world. So in some ways, it was every day was a bit of a challenge to try it, because you were often the only, certainly the only officer in that situation. But I enjoyed it, and it was very challenging in, going out to sea with 4 ships, and you're responsible for the health of everybody. Sometimes it was very, lots going on, but I got to do really interesting things. I flew in helicopters and jets, and looked after the air crew, did a lot of diving. So it was quite, and met some really wonderful people, which is the thing that really keeps you going.
Do you miss that?
You know what? I miss, it is something that I think younger people do. So I really value the experience, but I don't really miss it at this point.
Now, I was fascinated to read that I mean, you've traveled a lot. So you've been to Uganda. I come from Kenya. So you were in Uganda for Ebola. How was that experience for you?
You know, that was another one of those places that I learned a lot about how people deal with a crisis, and how the things that we do as leaders, but also as physicians in dealing with these major outbreaks, how we can help people get through it. And Ebola is a horribly frightening disease that kills people, and it's stressful on communities, and it was very, very difficult. And this was in the northern part of Uganda, in a place called Gulu, where there was also a civil war going on with the Lord's Resistance Army was kidnapping children. So it was a very, very stressful time for everybody. And I realized how important that caring for the community and building relationships and helping people support each other. And that's something that stayed with me a lot. And I think part of my response now is based on those experiences, how important it is to communicate, and the words that we use and how they matter, and how we need to show that we care for people, especially when people are frightened.
Your trip to Pakistan, did you go to Pakistan as well?
I've been to Pakistan and Afghanistan, yes, and India.
Oh, wow.
But working with polio eradication.
Yes. How was your trip to the part of India that my ancestors come from?
Where are your ancestors from?
Well, my father's side would have been in Pakistan, which is now in Pakistan. My mother was born in Africa, so was we. We were all born in Africa, in East Africa. But historically and ancestrally and culturally, you are Indian.
Right.
So, you know, so was your trip to Pakistan and India, was that a memorable trip?
It was very memorable. Again, I was working with the WHO, the World Health Organization, and UNICEF on polio eradication. So I was all over Pakistan. We were sort of based in Islamabad, but I spent quite a lot of time in the Northwest Frontier Province, which is very on the border with Afghanistan, and down in Sindh. So a lot of people after partition came down to the Punjab province of Pakistan. So yeah, I learned a lot there as well. You know, and the history of the area. That was something that we didn't learn a lot about in school in Canada. So I had a real appreciation for, you know, how the history of that area affected people. And the fact that you know, one thing at the time I was living in Toronto, and it really struck me how we in Canada have people from Pakistan, what's now Pakistan and India, who came here and are able to live together in harmony because, you know, they have such a common shared history, and we're not being forced apart by those political boundaries that are now in place in Bangladesh and India and Pakistan.
That's true. That's true. One day we should talk about that openly. Yeah. I'd like to take a short commercial break and come back and talk about what's happening right now within the communities, and that we should not be letting our guard down. We're talking to Dr. Bonnie Henry. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Women in Focus today is Dr. Bonnie Henry. So, Dr. Henry, your name is so beautiful. Is it the real name?
It is. That is my. So Bonnie, my family's origins, my mother's family in particular, are Scottish, and my grandfather. My grandfather was born in Cape Breton, but his family had emigrated from Scotland, and my father's family have been in Prince Edward Island for a long time, but they're Welsh. So Bonnie is a Scottish name, and my middle name is Fraser. So
I see.
My mother's maiden
Bonnie
name.
Fraser Henry. Okay. Now, we were talking earlier about let's not let our guard down. But before I go to that, I wanted to talk to you about being the provincial health officer. A lot of stuff comes under your jurisdiction. Opioid is another issue which is huge for us in British Columbia. How much time are you able to give to that?
Yes, and that has something that is something, the overdose crises that we've been dealing with since we declared an emergency. It'll be 6 years in April, and we were making such good progress. We weren't where we needed to be, but this pandemic has really made that so much worse, and that has been one of the things that has been most distressing and challenging for us. The things that we put in place to try and protect people from this virus have exacerbated that disconnection and the challenges that many people who use drugs are facing. And I've, this past year, my focus has been on two things. It's been on the pandemic, and it's been on the overdose crises, and trying to mitigate some of the things that have been in place. But it has been very, very hard. And we're starting again to make some progress. The only places where things that I can say are, I put out a report around decriminalization of people who use drugs. We've put in some measures to allow more people to prescribe pharmaceutical alternatives, because we know that part of the things around the pandemic have made the street drug supply so much more lethal. And those things, in some ways, the inequities and the challenges that the pandemic have exposed have given us opportunities to show people things that they had not wanted to see. The realization that people who are being affected by the overdose crises are our friends, our neighbors, our family. They're not just those people in the downtown east side or living on the street. They're the people that we go to work with who are now not connected in the right way or in the way we used to be, and they're suffering from that. So we've made some progress in, the government is supporting our decriminalization efforts. We're looking at how that might happen. We've made some good progress on getting alternatives for people. And really it's about finding those ways to safely connect people to the supports they need right now. And we're not where we need to be, and no one thing by itself is going to solve that, but all of these little things together can bring us through both of these crises. I'm hopeful.
With the opioid as a crisis that you have to always think about, alongside with the pandemic that we are going through, I know that we all are people that want to hug each other, be happy, be in families. It's been years, a whole year, that we haven't had a huge big party to go to. But having said that, people have gone through mental anguish, and that very clearly shows when people are talking, that physically they might be okay, but mentally they're not. You must be very worried about that as well.
I am indeed, and yes, those connections that we're so used to, that are so part of what keeps us human and keeps us together, and I know in families, those big celebrations, whether it's religious celebrations or celebrations of life, like births and weddings, and how important that is to our sense of community. But I also know that we can do this, and we've seen many just simple little things that make a difference in people's lives, and we have to remember that more than ever right now. So reaching out and connecting, having those phone conversations, having those FaceTime conversations, even just little things. We're tired of it now. We don't want to ever be on another Zoom call again. But it's more than ever, for the next few weeks, months, we need to continue to just send a note, give somebody a call. I get some people who write me letters, which I just so appreciate. And I get lots of things from young people, and they write me pictures and send me things. It makes a difference. we do know that we can connect with each other. And we need that more than ever right now, because we will be able to get back to these. And this is what's so important. We need to support each other. The uncertainty and the anxiety and not knowing what's going to happen is what causes a lot of people's mental health issues. Right now, we're thinking this is going to last forever, and especially for young people, it's such a large part of their life. But it is going to end, and I say it with passion. It is not forever, but it is for now, and we need to continue to remember that, because there is an end now, and now is not the time to give in to that feeling of okay, we'll just let it all go. It's too much. We can hold on. We can hold each other up. We can support each other. Now's the time to start making sure all our aunties and grannies and sisters are getting out there for their vaccine, and looking at how we come together as a community to get our elders and seniors protected. And then it'll be our turn. And that's going to come very, very soon. And by the time we get to the summer, we're going to be able to have our families together again. Maybe not completely, like not all our international relatives coming over, and still keeping our groups pretty, smaller, but we will be able to hug each other again, to make sure that we can do it in a way where we're not going to put people in danger. And that's coming. And it's going to be coming quicker than we were initially thinking, with the new vaccines that we have online. We're going to be in a different place in the summer. But right now, we still got to hold on, and we got to support each other, because we know that most people will bounce back. And what they need right now is continuing to reach out to each other, continuing to give each other a safe hug and support each other.
Very profound words, and thank you for those. And last question from you. How will history remember COVID-19?
Oh, I don't know that I can think that right now. I think we look at how it has disrupted things around the world. If anything, it has shown us that we are connected as a global community. And we've seen so much, what happens in China affects us. What happens for us early on, the realization that what was happening in Iran affected us here. What's happening in India right now affects us here. Recognizing that we are, and this is something I've said too, that we are all in the same storm globally. But we're not all in the same boat. We don't all have the supports. We don't all have the systems to care for each other. We don't all have the ability to safely isolate or to stay home from work when we're sick. And I hope that this will be a realization globally that we need to support each other. We need to get to address some of the inequities that we really have been exposed by this virus in a way that is much more recognizing that we have so much more in common, and that by lifting each other up, we lift everybody up.
Well, I thank you very much for your thoughts and taking time out of your very busy schedule and talking to us. Thank you so very much for being our Woman in Focus today.
It was lovely to meet you, and thank you so much.
Dr. Bonnie Henry has been our Woman in Focus today.